warm welcome and tell you that we are very happy to have the ELAEE here this year. I don't know how much you guys know about our university. We are a small private university in Brazil, non-philanthropic, dedicated to science and to this dialogue between science here and humanities. One thing that distinguishes us is that although we are probably in the range of this in terms of size, way below in the ranking in Brazil, we are the university that has more industrial partnership. I don't know that there is some international ranking that put us even internationally in the top 5. PUC has a very strong commitment to change the society, to help the society to evolve. So we take very serious the idea of bringing the knowledge, the research to the society. And probably the only thing I could, to be brief here, ask you guys is to keep this idea in mind. I know that we have lots of wonderful papers, but let's find real solutions, because I believe we are in a time that we don't have the speed of the change in the society, and the need for a new economy, new energy market is urges. So thank you, and have a very good event.
Thank you very much. So I'm giving a presidential speech now. So my name is Anne Neumann. I'm the president of the International Association for Energy Economics for this year, and it's really a great pleasure and honor to be in Brazil. It's the first time for me personally ever in Latin America. As a German, obviously, I had to go to Maracanã yesterday for historical reasons, but it's really good to see that you are part and we are part of trying to find solutions to improve our surroundings, our future for the next generations, not only in Brazil, but also in Ecuador, in Chile, in America, and all other parts of the world. So it's great to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the papers will cover in the concurrent sessions here, because I'm also here to learn and to remind us that we are all on the same planet at the end of the day. So I'm looking forward to our discussions. Make sure that you talk to one another, make sure that you meet somebody new every day, at least 2 people, and don't be shy to come up and talk to us gray-haired people and that sort of thing. Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Good morning. In the name of the Brazilian Association, I welcome you. I'm very happy that now the audience is not full, but I'm sure that it will be full during the day. I'm very happy to be here. It was 2 years ago when we were in Bogota, when we decided to hold the conference, the 9 ELAEE in Rio, and I'm very happy that you arrived here. And I would like to thank the Catholic University to host the conference, the people that helped a lot to bring the conference that's happening now. I would like to thank the colleagues from ELAEE, and actually I have to mention that we had a good participation from the local committee that was coordinated by Niagara Rodriguez, and also the committee program. It was very participative. It helped a lot to build a very good program. And I would like also the speakers that come from long distance to be here, the audience, the people who worked here, Marcia, Anderson, and the students. I think I didn't forget anyone, and I hope you enjoyed the conference. I'm sure that it will be a very good conference with good plenaries and corporate sessions. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's really a good pleasure to be here, to welcome you to the 9th Latin American Energy Economics. We will have here around 300 participants in this event. We will have 166 paper presentations and 32 conference sessions between today and tomorrow. Also poster sessions. We will have 10 main plenary sessions with 45 speakers. So thank you everyone to be here. It's a great pleasure. I have the honor to share this organization with Edmar de Almeida, Luciano Lozecan, and Niagara Rodrigues, so it's really a great pleasure to be here with you. We will cover a lot of topics in these sessions and discussions. We'll cover energy transitions, hydrogen, energy integration, system integration of variable renewables, a lot of things. Also in the actions critical minerals. So we hope that we'll have an enriching debate during this day. So thank you to the engagement with you. I would like to thank Edmar. It's a great meeting. Thank you, Edmar, to invite us to do this. Where is Edmar? Yeah, thank you. No? Hello? Hello? Yes, so thank you. So thank you, Edmar, for inviting us. It's really a great pleasure. Thank you, the Pontifical Catholic University, for hosting this seminar. The business school, Leonardo is not here, but Eloy, the PUC, so we are together with different institutions, the Fluminense Federal University, the Getúlio Vargas Foundation, PUC-Rio, in this organization. The program, we had a lot of Zoom meetings to discuss the themes and topics. It was truly a collaborative program, so we hope we will enjoy the discussion. And so, welcome. Also, we have a lot of sponsors that's very important to this organization. I have to thank the GNI, the thermal power plant here in the Porto Iguaçu. The PRUM is the Porto Iguaçu, Pinheiro Neto lawyers. It's important for the organization. Also, the Young School Initiative, Felipe Botelho, help us. They offer 6 students grants to come here. It's very important too. We have a lot of institutional supports. The City Hall of Rio, the planted, we are parallel events in this agenda. Also, University, the National Operating System will offer technical visits Wednesday. We will have also the group PUC, Gás Verde, is a biomethane plant. We will have a technical visit also with PRUM, so we have a lot of institutions here. I would like also to thank Joísa Dutra, the Getúlio Vargas Foundation, the Center for Regulatory Studies, for the support. Luciano, also the Fluminense Federal University, thank you for all the support. The local committee for the confraternization events, thank you, Niagara, and also the people involved. We are many people behind this organization. It's a collective work, so thank you a lot. Our administrative support, Marcia and others, so thank you. But I think that Thank you all of you to be here to engage this meeting. We hope it will be a very interesting discussion here. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Next. We'll go to the plenary.
Thank you very much. Let's start the work. There's a lot to do today. Thank you, Professor Marcel. So, good morning again. I'm going to be the chair of the first plenary session. So, and this plenary session will have the same name of the Congress itself, which is Energy Transition, Latin American Energy Markets and Development Pact. We want to organize a first session to have a first reflection on the main theme of the conference. And so for that we want to invite here 4 very important speakers. Anne Neumann, who was already here, please come back. Ralph Dickel, please. Guido Maiolini from Oladi, and Maurício Tomasquim, Professor Maurício Tomasquim from Petrobras. I will make a rapid introduction of the speakers and of the main theme. And the dynamic of this section will be each speaker will speak for more or less 10 minutes to give a first introduction to the topic, and then we will try to have a conversation about this theme. So first, let's talk about the topic. We have reflected very carefully about the name of this congress with the scientific committee that was formed by more than 30 persons. And we have a lot of meetings. The first meetings were to talk about what we want to reflect on this conference. And we came up with the idea of talking about energy transition, Latin American energy markets, and development. So it's strange. Why we want to talk about all these 3 things? Because we think that there is a very important challenge for energy economists or people who want to study or reflect on energy economics is how to make a convergence about these 3 topics. Energy transition, everybody talks about energy transition, is not a subject of the energy economists or the engineers, it's a subject of the society already. Everybody talks about energy transition. So we have to think, we at ELAEE have to think where, how, and where in this topic we can make a difference. Because it's not our team, it's not our topic. But energy transition, Latin American energy markets, it's very important to talk about this because we are latecomer in the liberalization process of the energy markets. We still are implementing reforms and implementing market mechanisms in the power sector in different countries, in the gas market, in oil. So we still have this agenda that Europe has implemented in the 90s. We still work on that. And we have a challenge of development. So how to link these things? How is energy transition an opportunity for development? So this is a very important question that I would like to reflect in this session. Is possible to conciliate reform, liberalization, and energy transition, and decarbonization? Is there specific tools, market designs that we can think of to implement here so that we do not come back to this centralized planning of the energy sector that is not possible anymore because we don't have the mechanism to do that again. And decarbonize. So it's a very difficult conciliation to have all these three dimensions. So in order to reflect on this, we have here Anne Neumann, who works, she's German, president of ELAEE, and she works in Norway, and she works with energy transition. She runs a program on energy transition initiative. She will give us a perspective, maybe from the north, and she's up there in the north, in a very rich country, so they have a specific perspective on that. Maybe they can think more freely about how to transform their energy system because, you know, they have the resources for that. But anyway, and then we invited Hans Dickham, who's from Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, but he has been in the National Energy Agency. He is a very important specialist on natural gas. He knows very well East Europe and Russia, and China, other big countries, so he can give us a very different perspective. We have also Guido Maiolini, he's from OLADO, the Latin American Organization for Energy. So I think that being in this position, he can give us a view of how other different Latin American countries see this challenge of conciliation between transition, markets, and development. And then we have our friend and professor from Federal University of Rio, Maurício Tomaschini, who is a old friend of ELAEE. He has been participating in our conference before, so he knows our community, he knows how we think, and he is in a position, maybe the most difficult job in Brazil today, which is to help the largest energy company in Brazil and in Latin America, the largest energy company in Latin America, to develop a strategy towards transition. Being an oil company that today makes most of their expenses from oil, how to look into the future and transition the company itself, but also, given the size of Petrobras, help Brazil to develop its policies, its business model. So it's a very, very big responsibility. I think that he can help us here to reflect on this subject. So, with no, I don't want to steal time anymore, so I would like to ask Anne Neumann to speak. Maybe if you can speak here, it would be better so that we can feel.
Thank you very much. So I have a PowerPoint presentation with 6 slides. Can you show it some of the 6? I don't know the PowerPoint presentation. So to kind of that wasn't perfect. So essentially, I think not stopping very short anymore, I would say I firmly believe, and the evidence has shown that competitive markets can deliver on all 3 aspects. Right? They can deliver on security of supply, they can also deliver on decarbonization, and they can also produce price signals that provide economic efficiency. So we can stop here, I think, but we will not do that. I think I was going to start, give you a broad perspective from the European side. So I am German and I live in Norway. And I think I will also dwell on that a little bit better. Europe is not a homogeneous product, but it consists of several countries that have implemented different strategies, right? There's an overall idea that the energy transition can actually unlock benefits, such as a cleaner and healthier environment. It can provide more affordable and less volatile energy costs for both consumers and private consumers and businesses. And it can increase energy resilience and security, it can induce infrastructure investments, and it can create jobs. I think that is also a very important aspect. In Europe, there's a belief, or Europe aims to be the leader in the energy transition and has documented this by different policy pieces. It has a strong support for clean technologies, and it has ambitious decarbonization agenda, including policy initiatives such as the European Green Deal, as the Fit for 55 package, which just aims at reducing carbon dioxide emissions substantially by 2030 and to zero by 2050. Due to the the world and the geopolitical situation, Europe has experienced headwinds in achieving those goals lately, in the last 5 years, I would say. There was the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. We have observed lingering effects of the pandemic. We have seen and observed, experienced painfully supply chain disruptions and inflationary pressures. Nonetheless, but these effects together basically threatened energy security and affordability in European countries, because many of the European countries are net importers of oil and gas, and thus particularly exposed to energy reliability and market volatility risks. So they have seen, Europe has implemented some more policies like the REPowerEU package, the Critical Mineral Act. We are looking and changing the market design in electricity markets again. And we have done some learnings, and I think that could be important to people or to countries, regions that are implementing liberalization packages at this moment in time, or are planning to do this, because we have experienced in Europe now that this transition requires a substantial shift in both energy supplies and large-scale electrification of tremendous magnitude, right? So it's not just a little bit, but to put it into numbers, I think to my knowledge, the rate of installation of renewable energy sources would have to increase 3 to 5 times as of today in Europe on average, right? So Norway is different. On the demand side, it will mean that we see substantial and cross-sector electrification, which would require to reduce the direct demand for fossil fuels. And then there's companies like Equinor, Petrobras, maybe some French companies also, Total. There's a competing interest in this thing. And I think we need to find a solution that is sufficient for all of them. And the third number is the number of battery electric vehicles on European roads would have to increase up to 20% by 2030. And in Norway we are there. All 98% of new car registrations are battery electric, but this is not the same in Portugal or Spain. So the key challenges Europe is currently identifying and experiencing are, first of all, that we need to create a resilient and scale supply chain for key decarbonization technologies. Right? So if there are ships that cannot go through different harbors, we need to be able to still produce those products locally. So we need to build partnerships with raw material suppliers, and we need to scale up the European manufacturing of some items. The second observation Europe is facing at the moment is that the energy grid infrastructure needs to be expanded, right, to support the resilience and to reduce the barriers to integrate renewables. So we are thinking about integrated system planning, not just gas and electricity by its own, but including, for example, also the heat sector, here it would be maybe the cooling sector, and the hydrogen sector. And also to implement demand-side measures to reduce peak demand. The third point I would want to make is that we need to look at land use policies in Europe. We need to re-examine those policies given the societal and regulatory constraints to accelerate the development of renewables. We can go into depth afterwards if we go into the discussion. We are currently in the third wave of redesigning the power market, so from monopolistic power market structures to liberalized market structures, and now fine-tuning and adjusting it to the current needs. We're actually experiencing how does it actually work to take the textbook example of liberalized markets and adjust it to the real world situation. And then there's, storage optimization that needs to come with it, flexibility that needs to be able to be provided by the system, and so on. The last point I would like to make before I pass the word on is that we ensure that the clean technologies will be affordable, right, to all members of the society. To enable the adoption and to accelerate the energy transition. If you're an economist maybe in the room and you heard about learning rates, right? So we need to make sure that we experience those learning curves, that the costs of the clean technologies come down gradually, and basically those sustainable technologies have it easier to enter the market because they have experienced the cost decrease. I think I would leave it at that at the moment, and I'd take out the other slides afterwards in the discussion, if that is okay.
So please, Half Deco. Yes, we have some slides, please. Can you project?
Okay, anyhow, let me say that I'm very happy to be here. Rio is a wonderful town. I've been here before. And also, after all, Rio was a starting point of sustainable development. This is already now 32 years ago. And unfortunately, one must say that time is running out. And as we say in German, time is burning on our fingernails. Now, I agree with the wonderful function of competition, first of all, as a German, as an IEA or as an ex-IEA people. I agree also with markets as a wonderful instrument, but I have some doubts that markets per se can address market failure. So that is something where governments come in and where governance comes in, and to some extent then also governments must understand what the target is they want to follow, and then eventually how to implement it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the pathways to decarbonization and also a little bit about the experience in Germany. Next slide, please. Oh, also I can do it, yeah? Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, so that chart is Say again? Yeah. Okay, so this chart is quite a telling chart. I mean, here you have on the x-axis, you have the number of people which are living in certain regions or in certain countries, and on the y-axis you have their specific emission per capita in tons per carbon dioxide per year. Now you see there's a bit of a divide between kind of the first 3.5 billion people, which is OECD people, Annex 1 people, and last but not least China and OPEC. And the right-hand side, which is starting basically with Latin America, and then comes also other areas of the world, South Asia, Africa, and many others, whose emissions are really, really low. And they are low in Brazil to some extent because of a past intelligent policy. But for many other countries, like in southern Africa, also in South Asia, they are just low because of poverty. Now, if we want to achieve a net zero target in, let's say, 2050, which is more or less the paradigm that we follow now, then yes, these countries have to reduce their emissions per capita, but then to some extent they are poor now, and then they reduce their CO2 emissions and they still will be poor. So the question of development for those countries is not really addressed. I mean, whether they develop their wealth or not doesn't play a role for decarbonization. But for the countries, it plays a very important role, and they will not agree to decarbonize their economy if there's not a way out of poverty for them. And these are 4.5 billion people which are emitting not so much and basically having a relative low income. And from the growth of this world, about 2 billion by 2050, 2/3, no, 3/4 will be in those regions, and only 500 million will be in the industrialized world. That means they have also to take care of another 1.5 billion. Next slide, please. So I want to now address a little bit kind of the experience of the country I'm citizen of, namely Germany. And here in Germany we have a lot of ambitions. In fact, these ambitions were also charmed and being defined more concretely. But then we also have a lot of gaps left. To start with, we have the Climate Protection Act, which, after it was a rather weak act, was then sharpened by our Constitutional Court, which said, okay, by intergenerational fairness, we cannot allow that this generation is eating up all the carbon budget that is left. And we can also not rely on a carbon budget which is more than 1% of the global carbon budget. That leaves Germany with, in 2015 with about 5 to 7 gigaton carbon dioxide at an emission of about 700 million tons in 2015. So that's a very ambitious goal to say we stay within 1%. And this was then translated to say we want to be net zero by 2045. Now that looks very ambitious, but in fact it's eating up more than, in addition to our fair share in the carbon budget, more than 30%. So there's a certain fairness gap. Now, when it comes to implementation, the present government has also had a coalition agreement with many ambitious goals. And when you look at them, there are also several gaps you would see. I will come to them in a second. So one thing is a conceptual gap. Another one is the performance gap, and a third gap that we see that was actually announced last week. There's a gap in hydrogen production, which will open up. And for that, we want to import hydrogen, green hydrogen from other countries. So next slide, please. Well, that graph shows a little bit the problem of net zero by 2045. So that is a dotted line. But the fair share of Germany's budget is kind of a straight line. And that means that basically, if we would follow that fair share, we should be carbon neutral by 2035 maybe. Now, that's not feasible. But 2045 is already pretty ambitious. But nevertheless, to be fair, one must say there is a fairness gap vis-à-vis the developing countries. And we have to think about ways to close it. Next slide, please. Now, there's also a kind of a conceptual gap with the concentration on renewables only, and the way it is defined in the government agreement. We would not reach our target by 2045. There would be a gap left with regard to the final energy, and on top of it, if we go all renewables, then there are also a lot of conversion losses which have to be compensated. So we would end up with a very large gap, and that is something where, in fact, we should also address CCS. Otherwise, we will not make it. Next slide, please. There's also a performance gap. I mean, here on the left-hand side in the graph, you see the ambition of our coalition agreement, 41 terawatt-hour per year. In addition, every year from 2021 to 2030. And on the right-hand side, you see our performance. So you see the performance in the middle, that is 10.9 terawatt-hour per year, which we performed over the average of the last decade. Then the first 2 years of this coalition, it was worse and a little bit better. And now in the last year it improved, especially because of a very strong rollout of photovoltaic, but we are only at half of what the government agreement foresees. So we have definitely a performance gap. Next slide. And we also have a gap that was announced last week on Wednesday. With our import strategy for hydrogen, we have a gap on hydrogen. For example, when it comes to electrolyzers, which are core for green hydrogen, we have less than 200 megawatt installed now, and we have a target of 10 gigawatt with 5 years to go. So that looks not feasible, but instead we then rely on importing hydrogen from other countries, green hydrogen if possible, from countries which should use indeed green electricity for their own grid. To name an example, Morocco has a very high share of coal in its energy mix, and to look to import hydrogen from Morocco, which is based on electrolysis, to Germany, and to transport it, which has a lot of losses, instead of leaving it in Morocco as electricity, is not the best for the country, Morocco, and it's also not the best for the climate. Okay, next slide, please. Now I want to address some different givens with regard to North and South. Well, in the North we have a population of about 2 billion in OECD countries and 1.5 in China, plus 0.5 which will grow between now and 2050. In the South we have some 4 billion people and a growth of another 1.5 billion. When it comes to meeting the targets of the Paris Agreement, then for the northern countries, this is a question of restructuring an existing infrastructure for a more or less constant number of people, and the challenge is then to kind of prevent reduction of living standard. When it comes to, and of course, when it comes to the southern countries, then this is, of course, a question of reducing the carbon dioxide emission. But first of all, it's a question to create carbon dioxide-free growth in those countries. Otherwise, these people will not be happy, and they will come to Europe, they will come to everywhere, and we will have a complete disorder, and it's also not fair vis-à-vis them. Then on the more geographic side, when you look on the demand cycle in northern countries is determined by daily cycles, weekly cycles, but above all also by seasonal and multi-annual cycles, whereas in southern countries that is just daily and weekly cycles, so that is much easier. Now, the good news, next slide please, and that was mentioned, the question of learning curves. The most fantastic learning curve is indeed with photovoltaic, and if you look on the right-hand side of this graph, you see that from 2022 to 2023, the cost to produce photovoltaic cells in China was reduced by 42%. So that is absolutely enormous. I mean, to some extent, there's a basis effect due to Corona, but nevertheless, it's a very strong performance. And at the same time, the capacity to produce photovoltaic cells was doubled. Now, the rule of thumb is that for a doubling of capacity, you have a reduction of 20% of the costs. So here it was really outperforming that traditional learning curve based on some specific historic singularities. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, what you see is that most of the capacity to produce photovoltaic cells is in China. Basically, all components are at least 90% in China. That is a competition that the West has definitely lost. I mean, there may be elements where the West can eventually make up and play a more niche role or the role of a challenger, but China definitely is in lead. And to some extent, you would, if you look, that is 1,000 gigawatt per year of photovoltaic cells. That is enormous. I mean, if you look at over 25 years, 25,000 gigawatt of photovoltaic cells, and if you multiply it, let's say, by 1,000 hours per year, then you have 25,000 terawatt hours, which can be produced based on photovoltaic cells from China if they continue the capacity they have. But you could eventually suspect that they will continue to expand their capacity. So the impact of China solving the global question of, on one side, poverty, and on the other side, also decarbonization is enormous. And in addition, of course, it's not on the graph, but 70% of the battery capacity is also in China. So China is indeed something to watch, and to some extent, one should not look at the problems that we have without looking at China and the potentials that China has, which was run under a completely different model. Now, next slide, there are different approaches between North and South, and the main difference is that in the south, in between the tropics, the sun is shining basically just above your head. Because in the north, as Anna is experienced, you have long winters, and basically they're also cold, and something you cannot avoid. And so you have to have heating in winter. You have a large seasonal variation, which you cannot cover by batteries. Whereas in the south, the chance that you cover the cycles by batteries are much better, because they're basically daily cycles and to some extent socially induced weekly cycles. So that is something which most likely you can cover by batteries, and then kind of given the learning curve, you can hope that these costs are basically within the range of what the market would deliver, the normal fossil fuel market. Whereas if you go to the northern countries, you will not be able to do without carbon capture and storage, and that comes as an extra. And that means you have to find ways to internalize that externalities. So when it comes to financing, then when it comes to the southern countries, what you have to finance is development. Development which is carbon dioxide free, for which you have a technical instrument, namely photovoltaic and batteries, and electric system, all electric system. Because in the northern countries, all electric system will not work alone. I mean, you can push for them, that's fine, and you can push out all the fossil fuel production, but in the very end, you have to include, for a target in 2045 or 2050, you have to include CCS, which is very highly disputed, but even in Germany, the attitude is changing slowly now. Yeah, so, and as a word of encouragement, next slide, there was this famous speech of Kennedy at the American University in 1963, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he was saying our problems are man-made, so they can be solved by men. Now, of course, we should say now they must be solved by men and women. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ralph Deacon, for this very detailed presentation on the roadmap for any transition in different parts of the world. And now I would like to invite Guido Maiolini to give perspective of Latin America, view from Quito, Ecuador, in ELAEE.
Thank you. My name is Guido Maiolini. I work as the Chief of Staff of the Executive Secretary of ELAEE, the Latin American Energy Organization. I must say I'm a diplomat by training, which means I won't use any slides. I will speak a lot, and I will say nothing of substance. But firstly, I would like to, since it is my turn to deliver the view of Latin America, this great responsibility, I try to give a little bit of context. Since when we speak about energy transition, energy markets and development path, we speak from the developing world. And this means for us that our economies have been struggling for long with underperformance, low rates of investment, growth, employment, savings, and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean speaks about the second lost decade in the past 10 years, and the pandemic was a huge blow on the already weakened tissue of our economies. So this first I do not intend to be a party washer, but these first notes of context are indispensable to understand from where we see the transition, what are the chances, the opportunities that we face, and from where we face them in this stage of our history as a region. Technological change generates enormous opportunities for Latin America and the Caribbean, especially with the wealth of resources that we have. We have the lowest carbon energy matrix in the world, and especially the importance of renewable energy in a region before the progress of photovoltaic and wind energy was already huge and remarkable, and it has been a mainstay of the decarbonization of the world energy matrix. We can lower the cost of the energy that our peoples use, our homes and our businesses. We can harness the competitiveness of our economies, and we can also gain resilience before that great threat that climate change is as a species. Some decades ago, a great political principle to address globally the fight against climate change was devised in this very city, and it speaks about common but differentiated responsibilities. So from the developing world, we look at the fight against climate change with a strong commitment towards a challenge that we face as species, but also acknowledging the situation from where we address this issue. Let me say a quick word about the work that we do in ELAEE. All the 27 member countries of ELAEE are members of the UNFCCC and also signatories of the Paris Agreement, but all have devised and developed their sovereign itineraries to decarbonize and to fulfill their climate commitments. We, as a technical support institution, work with them in order to cooperate, to assist them technically, and to devise what may be the most difficult work we have to do in this region, which is achieve common denominators, create common denominators in terms of energy policies in the region. So and that's why I think the idea of this panel is very challenging, but on point in terms of how do we decarbonize, how do we integrate energy markets, and how do we conciliate the diversity which is particular to this region. The development, I will use a phrase that's from the 60s, 70s, which is not development path, but development styles. What are going to be the features, the main features of the development projects of the countries of the region? Well, this is for the countries themselves to decide, but we have to, if we are going to have a transition that may be not just successful, but practicable, we will need to have huge agreements. We will need to have political agreements, firstly, to address two huge challenges that we face as a region. And firstly, in terms of financing, we are hugely underinvested if we're going to fulfill the goals that as a region we have set in terms of energy transition. Last month, June, tracking SDG 7 report was released. It's a report made by IEA and the World Bank, and we participate in a technical fashion. And the public financial, international financial flows of investment for energy transition in Latin America keep falling, and we are even amongst the developing world very far behind. So financing is a main issue. Yes, and I would like to say a word about the other challenge that we face, which, as I said, which has more to do with policy, which is integration. Some 50 years ago, we saw some very remarkable pulses in the electrocardiogram of the energy integration of the region. In 1973, the Latin American Energy Organization was created. This is not to do self-advertising, but also Itaipú Treaty was signed, Yacyretá Treaty was signed, the work in Salto Grande was begun, the first nuclear energy plant started delivering energy in Latin America. So there have been instances in which, in the history of this region, in which political agreements, technological progress, and technological agreements, technological progress have been able to further the development of this region. Nowadays, I'm not going to make a story of the energy diplomacy of this region, but nowadays we are facing a new challenge, and this has to do with the subject of this panel, as we see it, which is market integration. We are very far behind, as Edmar noticed. I must point out one difference. The process of liberalization in Europe was preceded by the creation of a unified polity or body politic, which was the European Community, and then the single market endeavor process came after. We as a region, we have a lot of political dialogue, we have many spheres of cooperation, but we do not have supranationality as was in Europe a precondition of the gas and electricity markets unification. So this is a challenge that we hope we can address. We feel that in terms of financing and also in integration, but in terms of financing, the Brazilian presidency of the ETWG, the Energy Transitions Working Group of the G20, delivered the keynote. They hit the nail, as one would say, putting planning, and I'm here chairing a panel with Mauricio Tolmasquim, who's like a very standing figure of the history of energy planning in Brazil. Energy planning at the center of de-risking financing for the transition. This is very important. But planning is also very important for delivering concrete aspects of the integration. We have been in this region talking about integration for long. Everybody acknowledges, all of the countries acknowledge integration as a goal of their energy policies, but in the end, the planning is done nationally. So one of the aspects in which we are working and we will be working is trying to deliver integrated energy planning exercise in the region, setting the institutional frameworks for it. We feel it's paramount, not only to give the market, and I would like to pick a point of polemic with Anne, gently. Now that in this part of the world, the market sometimes lacks to deliver success in all of the three aspects that we've been discussing, no? And the public policy has to step in, and that's why I wanted to mention the successful story of Brazil's EPE. That is very important, because when you give a horizon of certainty to the investors, this is very important. But when you can give, if we can create the institutional framework to deliver international, regional certainties in terms of system expansions, in terms of regulatory convergence, well, we would probably not do it as fast as Europe did it, but we may be able to do it and to get some progress. And finally, in terms of the last aspect of this panel, which is development, I would like to say a quick word about the concept of just transition. What is going to be the economic, the societal features of this region as we transition, as the countries create their own path, their own trajectories? This is very important for us because there is a point in which, and we were talking about common but shared responsibilities, and of course you all know, you're energy economists, you all know that the emissions of the energy sector of Latin America and the Caribbean are far below, even I think they're about half of the average of the world in terms of the relationship between energy emissions and other sectors of the economy. So this is very important for us. We are going to transition, but what is going to be left? What employments, what new employments are going to be created in this region? Of course, some employments will be lost because of the technological change, but what will be left with us? I am glad to find here Jorge Arvaci, who is an academic of the University of Brasilia, and he coined a concept which is very, very fertile for the debate, which is called power sharing. And this has to do with trying to think strategically where are the employments of the future and the industries of the future will be located. And we, of course, we've heard a lot of friendshoring in this geopolitically fractured world, and geoeconomically fractured world also. But what about power sharing? What if we try to think energy as a harness to development in this region? What if we try to invert it and say, okay, we're going to transition, what employments will be left with us? Okay, and what if we think that energy transition and the huge amount of renewable energy that is already available in the region and that is going to be available if we devise these institutional frameworks for joint planning, for regulatory convergence. And then you see that in terms of international justice of the transition and in terms of development path, we have an opportunity. Energy can be a way out of a secular labyrinth, I'd say, for this region. So finally, I would like to thank the organizers of this event for the invitation to speak here on behalf of ELAEE, because for us as an organization, as a political or technical organization, it's increasingly important to develop more intense relationships with the academy. Yes, because of course, with the private sector, we've created last year, for the first time in 50 years, a permanent organ in the organization to develop an institutional dialogue with the private sector. But with the academy is particularly important because the scale of the challenge that we're facing in terms of transition, in terms of changing the way in which we produce and we use energy, because of course these tendencies that we've discussed before have to do also with the decarbonization, not only of the energy production but of the demand, and the neglected child of the last agreement, which is the doubling the energy efficiency rate, right? Because everybody speaks about tripling renewables, but so demand is also very important. So a cultural change is ahead of us, And this effort has to be addressed collectively. So the academy is very important because the traditional way of work of the development banks and international organizations and other institutions that try to collaborate with the countries in the energy transitions, we use the plural because of the diversity, as we spoke before. If I didn't use the plural, my boss would be very angry. But what I mean to say, and this is the last, I assure you, is that we need you. If we as the Latin American Energy Organization and the institution where the energy debate and the technical assistance in Latin America takes place, if we are going to have a successful transition, if we are going to at least address this huge challenge ahead of us, we need you. We need the academics. We need you, and we are very glad to be able to be here today to tell you that we'll be in touch, and to please be in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guido, for this inspirational talk. I think this is really good to hear. First, that ELAEE is thinking strategically about energy transition, and that you recognize that institutions like IAEE and Latin American Association for Energy Economics can collaborate to create this view and vision about how we can evolve in our region. But we're going to talk more about that. But now I want to ask Professor Mauricio Tomasquim to give his speech.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for the kind invitation to be here again in this seminar. I should say I'm a little shy because the last time that I was here, I was talking about power sector, about as, let's say, an officer from the government, for head of energy planning agency, or as academic, as professor of Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. But now I have another hat, and then I talk as Chief Energy Transition Officer from Petrobras. That's a big oil company. But I cannot impeach myself to make some comments about what is said before, because you are talking about this change that you have liberalization, then now you have state in Europe, now you have had a liberalization, and then you have a little bit of return of the state, of the policy. And that's very interesting because we have the same movements in Brazil. And when we build our, what we call the new model for the power sector, we try to link both. Let's say, have a free market, a liberalized market, but also knowing that was necessary to have some state policy. And that's why you have developed in Brazil the energy auctions, that when we start Brazil, we are the first country to do that. All around the world, I saw my colleagues say, oh, what we are doing, what's this? And now there are, I think, more than 150 countries in the world that do auctions and, let's say, have some kind of energy policy is something that is accepted, as you have said. But saying that, I'm not going to go further talking about that. I'm going to put my head of an officer of our oil company. And I think I will try to answer one question that normally some people make to me. That's why a oil company is worried with energy transition. Not to worry, but why oil companies are investing in energy transition? Why Petrobras has created an energy transition officer? Well, not only Petrobras, you take most of the oil companies has did that before. They have some very high-level officer that deal with energy transition, that want to implement oil transition. So the question, why oil companies are investing in, let's say, competitive products to oil? And I think there are two main answers to that. The first one, too linked to the reality. The first one is the decrease in oil demand. This is a fact. You have many, many scenarios. Most of them, in most of the scenarios, there is a decrease in oil demand. You all know, but I would like to remind you the scenario of the International Energy Agency. They have, as you said, three scenarios. The first one is the state policy scenario. In this scenario, there is a small increase of 8% in the oil demand up to 2050. But in this scenario, there is an increase in temperature of 2.5 degrees Celsius. What's catastrophic for the world? The other scenario is the scenario that's in connect with Paris agreements. All the countries do what they have commit in Paris, what would happen. And in this scenario, you have a decrease in oil demand by 40%. So we are now with a demand of 100 million barrels per day. We are going to be in 2000, if the countries meet their agreement, the demand will be something as 57 million barrels per day. And the third scenario is the net zero scenario, where the demand fall by more than 75%. The oil demand fall by more than 75%. So there is a high probability that the demand for oil will decrease. There is a slight possibility that does not happen, but if this is the case, this will be very bad for the climate and for the world and for the people that live in the earth. So why this is happening? Why the oil demand is decreasing? The main reason is governments are setting very ambitious decarbonization goals. The governments are doing energy policy, mainly in Europe. And you have net zero commitments in 128 countries all around the world, represent 88% of global emission and 92% of world GDP. So let's say this is a subject that has conquered most of the world leaders, the world countries that have some kind of energy policy. Second, as consequence of those policies, we are seeing a very impressive reduction, cost reduction in renewables. In the last 10 years, the onshore wind, the cost of onshore wind fall by 72%, and from PV, 90%. I'm not talking for the last 2 years that he has shown that there was yet a very important decrease in PV cost. And as a consequence of the decrease in PV cost and the increase in competitiveness, you see that there is a very important increase in solar and wind capacity, something that the wind has increased 36 times, and solar PV 40 times the total capacity. The third reason why the demand is falling is transport. As you know, transport is the main sector that where you use fossil fuels. Let's say, oil products. And what they are seeing is that there is a forecast that the global sales for carburant engines is decreasing. The figure that I have, that the current annual sale of internal combustion vehicles is something about 80 million units. And the forecast is in 2040, they will fall from 80 million to 50 million. So, and what is happening at the same time is a very important increase in electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles, but mostly electric vehicles. And again, what is conducted that, what's making that happen is state policy. You have many countries that only allow registration or sales of battery cars or hybrid cars. I have a list. Iceland, United Kingdom, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Austria, Greece, France, Spain, many states of United States. It's a large list of countries that are saying, well, we are not going to allow sales of carburant engines. So you have to replace for other cars. And you have countries that are doing that. That's the policy most that Europeans do. To have also the policy from the United States that has not something so mandatory, but has, with the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, incentives to the electrical cars in a way that the electrical car would be only competitive with the carburant car in 2028, and after IRA, the electric car is competitive with the engine car. If so, both two kinds of policy, one mandatory, the other, let's say, using market incentives, but both policies that are changing the demand. And so the first reason for the oil companies invest in other sources than oil is that the demand is falling. There will still have demand in 2050. Don't think that there will not exist oil demand in 2050. In all the scenarios, there will be oil demand. It's why this explains why many companies are still looking for oil, because that makes sense, because there is still need oil at that moment. And while there will be demand, the oil companies will produce oil for that demand. This is a fact. And let's suppose that one oil, Brazil, Petrobras, at a moment decide, I'm not going to produce oil no more. What happened with the climate? Probably the temperature of the world would increase. Why? Because the oil that's produced by Petrobras emits less than the oil produced by other companies. If I leave the market, probably the demand continues. It's somebody that emits a lot more will produce this oil. So it's not the supply side that will change the game. It's the demand side. And this is how the game is played. But I would like to talk the second main reason why an oil company look for decarbonization, energy transition, because other actors are moving also. So most of the financial entities are moving to, let's say, to foster only, to give financing to enterprises that are decarbonizing their process. So I'm going to give an example. The Net Zero Bank Alliance is an initiative founded in 2021 with 43 banks that the main goal is supporting the global economy transition to net zero emission. And now it has more than 132 banks that take part of this initiative, represent 41 countries and 41% of global resource. So we are talking that if you do not do the decarbonization, probably you have problem to obtain financing. And the second reason is the same thing are happening with investments in portfolio. So we have an institutional investment group on climate change with 400 members spread all between 26 countries with a combined assets of 6 trillion euros that say, well, not to invest in companies that emit a lot. So part of the investor of oil companies are pension funds, are entities that maybe are concerned with that. So my main message here is that invest in an oil company, invest in energy transition is a need, is a necessity. And so it's first at all, is for the ethical point of view, is the right thing to do, but it's not only the ethical part of thing that I'm talking. I'm talking that for the business point of view, for if you want that the company survive beyond, I'm not in the oil era because the oil will continue for many years, but beyond this period, we need to diversify this company. So it's what I'm trying to do now at Petrobras. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mauricio. We have time for a quick discussion on what has been said here. Very, very interesting presentations on the challenges for energy transition, and in particular in Latin America, and in particular for a large company, oil company like Petrobras. So I will start with Anne. I think that Anne has given a view of how energy transition and energy policy is evolving in developing world, in developed world, and in Europe in order to foster energy transition. It's curious because we have been talking about if markets can deliver without planning, and it's I would say old-fashioned debate, because I think that markets without planning doesn't work. We need planning to make our markets to work. We need to adjust markets. So I will go to that direction. I would like to see Anne, to ask Anne what's the role of markets to deliver energy transition, and if you would give any recommendation for the G20 that's going to be here this year in a few months. Is there one or two recommendations of how to adapt markets, energy markets, or in energy policy in order to deliver a faster any transition, not only in the north, but also in developing countries, because I think that the adaptation should not be the same, I would guess. So what is your thoughts about that?
Thank you for the question, and I was planning to go back to Guido's comment as well. I think it's a session on its own, right? What are markets? How do we design markets? First of all, let me make the point that I never said in my statement that the market will deliver on all three characteristics at the same time. I think this is a very hurtful experience that we have at the moment, is that the markets, how you define them, they are vulnerable, right? And we need to make sure that we design markets such that they can survive such attacks. I'm exaggerating a little bit, very consciously here. So I think the design of markets includes it's not an intervention, but it needs to go hand in hand with governmental institutions, right? So I'm not opposing let the markets freely float. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you need to design a market such that we can, and the economists in the room will know this, that we can mimic competition. And it might be not the first best solution that we create, but a second best solution. So I think understanding the fundamental working of markets and these ideas of how prices develop, how quantities are being provided to the market is key. I think the idea should be to leave as much to the market as possible, but design elements such that the results can sort of converge towards first best solutions. And the question regarding the G20 recommendation, I'm too shy and I'm too, it's not my style to make a recommendation there. And I think it would be dangerous to make a recommendation because I do not believe there's one size fits all. I think countries, people, interests are too difficult to have one general conclusion. I think we have the Paris Agreement. I think that should be our guiding principle, and that should be the overall goal, and then we should have forces, whatever those forces are, identify environments in which markets can deliver. I mean, that might sound very cryptic, but I think that is my response here.
Thank you very much. Very good inputs for the discussion. Yes, I'll change now for half Dico that has given his roadmap. Actually, you're more in the side of energy planning and how to design policies and also markets, I would say, in order to identify different pathways toward decarbonization. One thing that is kind of you have mentioned, I think that also Anne has mentioned, is the role of demand side. And we can say that there is a lot of emphasis on the supply side, not only in the policies, energy policies, but also in the way society in general look at the energy sector. Like, for example, discussions here in Brazil about prohibiting to exploring oil in certain parts of the country, or the kind of pressure on the companies, in the oil companies, in order for them to stop producing. But very shy policies on the supplies and on the demand side, because that's where the voters are. The voters are there, so you don't want to, to deal and create restrictions or this kind of thing for the demand side. So my question is, what do you think is the role for energy policy towards the demand side? Is it the way that we are doing now in Europe or everywhere? Is in the good direction? Is there room for more planning regarding the demand side and rules for energy consumption in order to create these incentives for the supply side to evolve towards decarbonization? And the same thing, do you have recommendations for the G20? I'm asking this because we're going to have the last session of this meeting will be about what we think is our recommendations. So I'm trying to see if you have ideas on that.
These are very difficult questions, and I must say I'm happy I'm not in any government function. Then you are faced with your action and with mistakes you do. The starting point for me would be we are talking about an externality of quite some size. What you would consider to solve the problem is maybe measures which you can get at something like $100 per ton of carbon dioxide. When you look in this report of the National Petroleum Council, which was published 2 or 3 years ago, on which also the American policy was based, then you see a nice curve, and then you see, well, basically at $100 to $120 per ton, you can decarbonize a lot of the US industry. But that's quite a lot of money, $100 per ton of carbon dioxide. And that is something where, as a government, of course, then you have many interest groups which you have to look at, and then mainly, of course, your voters, your electorate. And so the question is, how can you reconcile all of that? In the end, it's very clear. It has to be paid by the customer or by the taxpayer. And then the question is also, how do you structure it? If you maybe that's not exactly your question, but if you compare, for example, the way the United States have done it in the Inflation Reduction Act, where they basically give a tax credit which is high enough, and it covers the first 20% of this nice cost. That means that that's for some time. And you compare it, let's say, with the European Union model, where you have an emission trading system which has a lot of uncertainties, also political uncertainties, but the basic issue is that it's a penalty. You penalize it. So, yeah, okay. So you penalize the industry. You say you pay a certain penalty, 80 euro per ton of carbon dioxide that you emit, and maybe higher, maybe lower. And that means you have to earn the money in the market, but it's not for you, but you pass it on to the government. And the government, in its wisdom, will then do some measures which they have not yet done before with all the subsidies they got out of the electricity energy. Erneuerbares Energiegesetz, EEG in Germany, where there's a surplus on the electricity price. So then, as an industry, you have to, on top of that, you have to see how you finance your investment. In the US, it's easy. You have a project which fulfills what the government has told you. Then you go to the government, you get a stamp by the government, and with that stamp you go to your bank, and the bank may do a second check if it's at all technically feasible and so on, and then you get your credit. In the European Union, first you have to earn the money to pay for the emission trading regime, and after that you have also to convince the banks that on top of it you can so much earn in the market to finance your investment. That's a very tedious procedure. So I think the Americans are much more pragmatic in that regard, to say, if you want the industry to do something, give them a clear framework and eventually subsidize them instead of penalizing them. Well, in the end, it's of course paid by the American taxpayer, and in the EU it would also have to be paid by the taxpayer. But then, kind of the EU emission trading regime has certain finesses in policies so that it offers a starting point for EU tax. So that is something the Commission is very keen on, and that has nothing to do with environmental policy. That is just purely power politics in Brussels. So the long and the short is, I mean, for industry, I think if you want to keep your industry, don't penalize it and have clear framework what you want to do in your decarbonization policy. And for the normal people, I mean, of course, yes, you also have to have a clear framework. And in Germany, we have this Climate Protection Act. By this Climate Protection Act, we are forced to be carbon neutral in 2045. That means the government has to enact things so that we are carbon neutral. So that offers also a basis for credits. I mean, basically, as a municipality, you know that you have a secured demand for carbon-free supply of heat, for example. So that offers you a basis to go to the financing market. So again, the long and the short is there must be decisive government action. The government must be clear, and they should also have a clear deduction how they want to achieve the net zero target, which so far they don't have, unfortunately.
Okay, let's go with this one. Yes, it's quite clear. I mean, your point is clear. We need to have clear incentives for the companies and financing. We are hearing a lot about financing here, and I think this is a very, very important issue for developing countries and in our region. In our region, we depend on external savings, in order to invest in all the sectors, but in particular in the energy sector. So we need to attract money from abroad to promote investment in the energy sector. And I think that it goes directly to what Guido has presented us as a challenge for Latin America, which is to find financing for the decarbonizing our industries, to attract investment for the renewables industry that we have already, but also to create a path for integration, to design policies and design markets in a convergent way. And you also mentioned that there is an opportunity for development, could be an opportunity for development with any transition through power shoring, for example. So my question would be, do we have here the ingredients for a recipe for a policy, international policy towards energy transition in developing countries and in Latin America, where we could find some agreement at the international level where these funds would be linked some way to this kind of overall directives and policies towards integration, market promotion, and decarbonization. How do you see, if you would talk with, and you do that, already do that, they talk with the banks and multilateral institutions and G20 countries, etc. How do you see how we can create a framework where these funds could be available for countries that has these right ingredients that will deliver, in the end, decarbonization and energy transition?
Obrigado, Edmond. In English. Since, once again, I'll say it, we're in Brazil, and I'm sitting alongside Mauricio, I will speak about the successful story of the joint work of EPE and BNDES. This is something that the region shouldn't lose sight of, because energy planning and stable institutional frameworks plus financing can deliver a scale unprecedented, in this case, of course, in the incorporation of renewable energy, and of course, an unbelievable, at the time, lowering of the energy costs, not only with benefits, not only in terms of environments, but also of in terms of social and human development, but also in terms of competitiveness for the exports. And this is very important. This is why I was speaking about planning. There has been a lack of. Is it working? Okay. There has been a lack of institutional infrastructure in terms of conversions, as you said, in terms of regulation has a story of more conversation, but the history of energy integration in Latin America and the Caribbean has had to do mainly with bilateralism. Yes, I was talking about huge feats of not only engineering, or also of political agreement, like Itaipu Binacional. But this was a bilateral initiative. We have had not the ability to build up on multilateral frameworks of political agreement which can deliver in time regulatory agreements, and also joint planning exercises which can deliver coordinated system expansions and tariff frameworks and so on and so forth. You know much more about this than I do. But we see that there is a consensus both in terms of policy and also on the private sector of the needs to step up the coordination. The development process of any country, it's huge. It's mainly always a huge coordination effort. This is nothing new, I'm saying. But in terms of the energy agenda and the energy policy agenda of the region, we need to step up our game, and that's why I'm saying that this is a commitment, and that we will need a lot of help in terms of, if you look at the roster of the presentations and the panels and the joint conferences that will take place for the next 3 days, but these are the key issues that we have to settle on, that we should agree on. These are the problems that we are facing as a region. So that's why we need to have much more dialogue between the academy and the policy making. That was my point. Thank you.
Every time someone give me a mic, then apparently it was working, and then, but anyway, now I'll move to Mauricio Tomasquin. I think that I will change completely the direction of the question, because in case of Mauricio Tomasquin, he don't need to give any recommendation to anyone, because he has the power to do things, you know, and because, and maybe Petrobras runs the most important budget for energy investment in Latin America. They are investing almost $100 billion, so they don't need to recommend anything. They just need to do things. And so what is important is what is the view of Petrobras. So I would like to ask Tomasquin, what is your vision, Petrobras' vision, about how to make the transition, and what are the main projects you intend to develop with all this money that you control?
Yes. Well, I agree with you. Petrobras can help a lot Brazil, not do everything alone, but has an important role because of its size. We are talking about $11 billion in investment and transition in 4 years, what's in the strategic plan. So part of this money is for decarbonization for our own process. So this is why it is important, because what I have said before, let's say we are going to have less demand of oil in the future. Who will be the companies that will be competing there? In my point of view, the companies that fulfill two resilience goals. First of all, have our oil competitive to other companies. And second, has a lower footprint in the oil production. Because I think in the future, as now you have different price for different kind of oil, maybe we are going to have different price if our oil emit more or less in the production. Nowadays, the oil of Petrobras emit less than 15 kilograms of CO2 per barrel, while in the average emission in the world is 17 kilograms of CO2 per barrel. So the challenge is to do that. And what we have as goal, let's say in the next 4 years, maintain the absolute emissions of the company, despite the fact that in the next 4 or 5 years, we are going to be installing 14 new FPSOs in the water. So, and spending refinery. So it's a big challenge that we are going to do that with intrinsic measures. And how this work, we have a fund of $100 million that we can invest, $1 billion, $1 billion that invest in decarbonization actions. How this works? You have a MEC curve with more than 700 opportunities of decarbonization. And then let's suppose that you have two processes there to be put in a new FPSO. One that costs less but emit more, another that costs more but emit less. By the governance of the company, we are forced to choose the one that emit more because it costs less. I cannot do different. But we can use this fund, if this is a good opportunity, to say, with a small amount of caps, I can transform the better technology option in a better return option for the economic point of view. So we are doing that, and at the same time we are looking to the scope 3. Well, what's scope 1 and 2? Scope 1 and 2 is the emission of the company, with the operation of the company. And during the operation, we emit something as 46 million tons of CO2. But the scope 3 is the emission from the production, the product sold by the company. And if you look at that, it's about almost 500 million tons of CO2. So I'm talking about 10 times more. So the big challenge is, let's say, go to the scope 3, produce renewables, and put in the portfolio this new technology. So we are looking to 4 main products. The first product is electricity, because we have from onshore solar and onshore wind, because we have already established regulatory framework, we have competitiveness. Now is the lack market, but let's say the price. But you have, so it's something that's already established. The second product, the most important one, is the molecule. Is, let's say, to produce biofuels. I mean by that, diesel, renewable diesel, biodiesel, and so on, SAF, and so on. The third product, the natural gas. Natural gas is not renewable, but it has a low content in terms of carbon footprint in relation to the other fossil fuels. And the fourth product is the capture of CO2. Petrobras is already, let's say, the biggest company in the world to capture CO2 from its own activity. We have, from the total CO2 capture last year in the world, 25% was captured by Petrobras. So this is an important mechanism. And now we want, let's say, to do better. We want to go to other geological formation, saline formation, closest to the shore, and then capture CO2 from our activities on shore, as refineries and sell space to capture CO2 from third parties, steel companies and so on. And what's link all these four products? The link for all of them is hydrogen. Because you need to produce the byproduct, SAF, renewable diesel, everything, you need green ammonia, you need hydrogen. And you can produce hydrogen, use the electron that you have produced with renewables. And you can produce hydrogen using the natural gas with CCUS, coupled with CCUS, and producing blue hydrogen or low carbon hydrogen. So this is the framework that we are working with, where, let's say, we're going from the electron to the molecule, and we are more a molecule company than not an utility, is why, but it has an important role in the company. So looking as investments, we have already 2 plants operating in Brazil producing co-processing products. You enter with vegetable oils and have renewable diesel with 5% of renewable content. We have 2 other plants planned, and we have 2 plants that will produce SAF with 100% of vegetable oils. And then, and other investments. So let's say, this is important movements to Brazil, but let's say it's not Petrobras that will solve all the problems. We are part of the solution, but this is a much bigger effort that we need all actors involved to solve the problem. But I hope that we can help one be a relevant actor in this process.
I think that Petrobras has the opportunity not only to be part of the solution, but also to be the benchmark for the oil companies in the world, because you are in Brazil. So you can do things here that the other companies cannot do elsewhere, and it's a big responsibility to be not only part of the solution, but a benchmark of the molecule industry. I like very much that idea, differentiating utilities and electronic companies from molecule companies, because maybe in the future that will be the business, selling green molecules. Yeah. But anyway, I think we are running out of time, but I will give the opportunity if someone from the audience want to make, well, get 2 questions, for example, before we end our session. Is there anyone who want to make a question to one of our panelists? And if so, please introduce yourself.
Gracias, Edmar. A question for Petrobras, or what about the use of a lot of diesel to do all the mining that the energy transition requires? I mean, we're going to need a lot of mining activity to do copper. You also need to extract lithium from my country, from other countries. I mean, there's tons and tons of millions of panels so we need a big demand for oil. Is that considered in the scenarios that you're talking about?
Let's try to get another question, if there is another question before. If not, yes, please. Só tem não tem jeito. Yes, can you identify yourself?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the brilliant speeches. I have a big question, what is your vision about energy integration in the context of sustainable development? This question is for ELAEE.
All right, we have 2 questions. If there is a third one, I will take. If not, one. Okay, one final question over there.
Good morning, Felipe. Thank you for picking my question. I'm asking for maybe Annie or Ralph. How about your thoughts about the energy transition and the context of higher interest rates, lower quantitative easing, and the renewable energy solution? We see oil companies suffering a bit about changing some strategies, especially in supply of oil. They are changing every single year, pushing a bit more oil. But how about how the energy renewables energy companies are changing their strategies to meet the energy transition in the world, especially electric vehicles and others?
Okay, so we have a first question for Maurice Tomaskin, and then Oladi, and then a third question. Please, so that will be our last intervention, so you can answer your question and then finish your participation if you want to say something.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, the demand for energy will continue to grow. The question is, let's say, for instance, you have talked about diesel and have gasoline. Diesel. What happened here in Brazil? I don't know. Now in Brazil, we have a law that, let's say, you have a quota for biodiesel. And this was increased and up to now, in fact, it can go up to 25%. So 15 up to 2030, and then they're going to can go up to 25%. So, and you have quotas for ethanol also. So what I mean, the demand continues to grow, but let's say the demand for the fossil fuel molecule will be reduced because you have a quota for the green molecule. So, and then we have to be there, because this is the question. So you're right, the mining, we need more diesel and other sectors, but the question is that when you have this, and I think that's leisure time policies is okay, but when we have that, we have consequence in terms of the fossil fuel products. When you have the electric car and the ethanol program, and you have, let's say, these mandates for electric car, or you have the IRA that gives subsidies for electric car, or you have the mandate for ethanol. The result is the reduction of gasoline. You are going to continue to need transport, energy for transport, but to change the kind of energy. So I think this is the world that we have to adapt ourselves. It's a fact. With the, I'm not saying, and most of them is results of policy. Let's say it do not happen automatically. It's only happens because there is a decision taken by the government that it's okay. It's part of the fight against climate change. No, I only want to thank the opportunity and say that I agree completely with you. Let's say what he needs a combination of, let's say, a liberal market with some control, some intervention, some action for governments, let's say, to try to have the least cost but alternatives, but at the same time allow us to achieving a goal that's combating climate change.
Thank you, Doctor. Una pregunta. Sí. Thank you. I think the way we see it, and I think it's the way that most of you will see it also, I hope at least, is that there is no conflict amongst those two, integration and sustainability, but it's a contrary, it's not a contradiction, but an alignment. They correlate positively, because if you, and now I'm going to talk just as an example of the power systems. If you have integrated power systems, you can use more of the renewables that you have, more hours of the day, and you can deliver more renewable power, you can reduce emissions, and you will also have more resiliency. Yes, and the backup infrastructure that you need, be it thermal, it'll be less dispatched. Should I say dispatched? It would be less dispatched. And of course, we have the technological changes not stopping, and new sources of storage, energy storage are coming along. But the way we see it is that we have two bottlenecks. One in financing, as we said, and the other is in terms of delivering these political technical agreements that will enable us to gain, to achieve gains in sustainability and reduction of emissions, at the same time lowering costs and gaining resiliency. So there is a huge political task, political and technical task ahead of us, and we hope we can at least further at least take some steps along the road, if not reach the ultimate goal. But we, as you quoted John Kennedy. I remember in the first State of the Union address, as he said, "Let us begin." Well, we should be beginning about doing this. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm not educated as diplomat. I'm very direct, and I basically, I'm not an expert in quantitative easing, and I would say my feeling is there's enough money around there. I don't think, money is a problem. People will tell you different, but so that's my belief. I think I want to take the opportunity to please come up and talk later on. And I want to take the opportunity to identify a topic that I have not thought about that you brought up, Guido. It's actually, you said something like, what type of employment is left to a country like Brazil or another country that already is really high on a level on renewable supply of electricity? And I think it brings you back to the point, this energy transition needs to be inclusive, right? It needs to be run by the people, for the people. And I think we should do not forget that we cannot only talk about this here, but we need to make this a just transition and include all people, not only the top 10%.
Yeah, I mean, if I may say something about money and how much it costs. I mean, if you talk about $100 per ton of carbon dioxide and an emission of some 35 gigatons, then basically you talk about 3.5% of world GDP. Now, our spending for military purposes is now exceeding 2% and much more than 2%.
Well, thank you very much for this very, very thoughtful and important session. We are out of time now, so thank you for your audience. Now we're going to have a coffee break. That's going to be in the building next, at the ELAEE. So, and then we're going to have some concurrent sessions. So, thank you very much. We'll be talking the next session.